Hello and welcome to the JSA studio. I'm your host, as always, Nathan, and today we are going to be breaking down the NFC East teams and their draft classes, grading every pick and the overall class. But before we jump into the video itself, I would like to ask you to subscribe to this channel, like the video, and comment down below, do all of the normal YouTube things. And now with the intro done and out of the way, let's go ahead and get started. The Dallas Cowboys are the first team that I'm going to be talking about today, and their draft class was pretty solid. A lot of picks at value. And what I mean by that is the way that the grades work in this video, as far as how I grade the picks. A pick at value is graded as a B because that's a good pick. A pick before value, meaning that you picked the player before I had them graded, would be graded less than a B, and a pick after value, meaning that you picked them after I had them graded, that would be graded higher. A good example of what I'm talking about is this first pick here, Tyler Guyton, an offensive tackle out of Oklahoma. I had a top 40 grade on him, meaning that value for him is pick 21 to pick 40. You took him at 29. That is a pick at value, meaning the grade is a B. And as far as Tyler Guyton goes, you are going to move him to left tackle, which generally speaking, I'm not a fan of moving players to the opposite side of the offensive line, especially for tackles, because it's a much harder transition than it is for an interior offensive lineman. But if there's a team that can pull it off, it's probably you guys. You guys do wacky shit on the offensive line all the time, and it almost always works out. Now, me personally, I would have been perfectly fine letting Tyler Smith play left tackle and then keeping Tyler Guyton at right tackle, and then probably you starting your later pick, your third-round pick, Connor Beebe, at left guard. But that's likely not what they're going to do. We'll talk about what I think you're going to do with Beebe when we get to him in a moment. But you're probably going to start Tyler Guyton at left tackle and then keep Tyler Smith at left guard, which, you know, he's arguably the best guard in the NFL, so that's a good place to have him be. And I do think that the plan, should steal your right tackle end up getting hurt, would probably be to have Tyler Guyton flip back to the right side and then have Smith kick out to left tackle. That's something that this team has done before with Tyler Smith. I think his rookie year, he started at guard and then became a left tackle, and then the left tackle went to right tackle. But I could be making stuff up. I don't remember. All in all, it's a good pick. I like Tyler Guyton, even though he was my offensive tackle, I think 7. I had like 8 offensive tackles with first-round grades, so I really, really liked this offensive tackle class, and I do like Tyler Guyton a lot. Your next pick, Marshawn Nealand, an edge rusher out of Western Michigan University. This is a guy who really got put on the map during the Senior Bowl week. I think it was the Senior Bowl. It might have been the East-West run game. I don't remember at this point in the process. But he was a riser throughout the process, and I like him a lot. I had a top 75 grade on him, meaning value for him would be between picks 51 and pick 75, meaning this is a pick at value and a B grade. Keeland has got a good amount of power and pop to his game. He can get around the edge pretty good and is a very good player in the run game. I also believe that during his career, he will end up having inside-outside versatility. He's a really good player, a really versatile player for this defense, and I think long-term, he's probably a DeMarcus Lawrence replacement. Now, DeMarcus Lawrence is still playing at a very high level. He's not the player he was a few years ago, but they haven't needed him to be the player he was a few years ago because they have Micah Parsons. I like the fit in Mike Zimmer's defensive scheme for Neyland. I do think he will need some time. I don't think this is someone who year one is going to come in and be anything more than a quality rotational player. But I do think this is a player that has starting caliber edge rusher upside, kind of like a good, not great sort of player upside, like a borderline Pro Bowl caliber player, where you're really happy you have him, but he's probably not a superstar. That's kind of the ceiling that I see with Neyland. However, the floor, I think, is just a really, really good rotational player. All around, it's a safe prospect. I like the pick, especially for a team trying to compete for a Super Bowl. This is a guy who will be able to contribute right away and has some upside long term. Your first third round pick, Connor Beebe, an interior offensive lineman out of Kansas State. Now, before I get to his grade, which, if you watched my offensive grades video where I graded every single offensive position, you would know that Connor Beebe has a top 50 grade for me, and getting him at 73 is after value. However, I had him graded as a guard in that video, not necessarily a center, which is where I believe he is ultimately going to end up for you. I think he's probably going to sit for a year behind Hoffman, I think is the name of your center. He is probably going to end up starting this year, barring injury, and BB will likely be the guy that takes over in year two. I also think that he could fill in at the guard position if needed. All that being said, I'm going to stick with my top 50 grade for him as a center, specifically because this team drafted him, and I'm going to go ahead and give the pick a B- grade. Up next is Marist Liufau, a linebacker out of Notre Dame, and I don't really know what to make of this pick because I like the upside as a Mike linebacker, which is what I believe he's going to play for you. He's 6'2", almost 240. He is the type of linebacker that the NFL is going to be shifting towards in the next few years as defenses adapt to what offenses are doing. However, I did have him graded as a 5th round grade. And even though I like the fit in the scheme, specifically because of Mike Zimmer being the new defensive coordinator, and he is like the linebacker coach in the NFL, like wherever he goes, quality linebacker play usually follows him. But also, I just wasn't as high on him as I was with other players. However, I will also say this. There also really wasn't that traditional next Mike linebacker, 240 pounds, 6'2", sort of guy left on the board. So it is a reach, but it's not that bad of a reach in my opinion, and I do like the fit. So even though it is a 2-round quote-unquote reach for me, I'm still going to give it a B-, mainly because of Mike Zimmer and my confidence in his ability to develop linebackers. Next 4 picks here, the day 3 picks, we're going to kind of move through them. I don't have a whole lot to say about all of them. As far as Kalen Carson, cornerback out of Wake Forest goes, I had a 4th round grade on him. I like him. I think he has the potential to end up being a rotational cornerback on the outside with potentially starter upside. That grade is a B+. And for Ryan Flournoy, a wide receiver out of Southeastern Mississippi State University. I don't think I had a grade on him to begin this process, but I had a 6th round grade on him after I went and watched the film this past week. He is a B, a grade for me. Nathan Thomas and Justin Rogers are also players that I did not have grades on. Rogers, actually, I lied. I did have a grade on Rogers. I had a priority undrafted free agent grade on him as a nose tackle. Nathan Thomas, another offensive lineman. I think he's a solid upside player. I think all in all, 7th round picks, I think he could have done worse. Probably lump them together, give you a B. And if you want my opinion on your overall draft class, you can go ahead and skip to the end of the video where I talk about the draft classes all together, as well as rank them. So you can either skip to that point, or you can stick around and see what I think of your divisional rivals during the next 3 sections. So Philadelphia is the next team on the clock here. And this is a team that absolutely knocked the draft out of the park, in my opinion. Just down the board across the whole draft, nailed damn near every single pick. Let's go ahead and start with the first pick that you had, pick 22 overall. You selected Quinyon Mitchell, a cornerback out of Toledo. He was my number 1 defensive player in this draft class. I had a top 10 grade on him, meaning his value would have been between picks 6 and pick 10, and you got him at pick 22, meaning that you were 2 rounds, quote unquote, or tiers is perhaps a better way to put it, after value. This pick is an A for a multitude of reasons. A, just the value of the pick, but B, also it addresses the biggest problem you had with your defense last year. James Bradbury, after being a first-team All-Pro caliber performer 2 years ago, completely fell off the map this year with the scheme change and the DC change. And Darius Slay also, he wasn't as bad as James Bradbury, but he was not as good as he was the year prior either. However, I think there's actually a decent chance that they both end up sort of returning to form this year with the new defensive coordinator and everything. And Quinyon Mitchell can go ahead and be that Darius Slay style understudy, or potentially a James Bradbury replacement. I think he's going to play a lot year 1. I think they're probably going to end up rotating corners quite a bit. And I think he's going to play really, really good. Your second pick was maybe the best pick in the entire draft for me, in terms of where I had the player graded, where they were on the big board, and where they ended up going. This is probably the best pick of the draft that I've at least graded so far, and I'm not sure there is a pick that is going to surpass that. Getting Cooper DeJean at 40 is an absolutely massive steal. I think this is likely you're going to convert him to safety, and he's probably going to be your starting free safety day 1, and also probably going to be a very, very, very good player for you day 1, potentially even playing at a Pro Bowl or All-Pro caliber level in year 1. Cooper DeJean, I think, was my 3rd corner in this class because I had him graded as a corner, but if you converted him to safety, he would have been my number 1 safety by a significant margin. And getting that at pick 40 is tremendous value. This pick is an A+ for me. That being said, the only pick that I kind of have a little bit of a problem with in this whole scenario here is Jalex Hunt, linebacker out of Houston Christian University. I don't even really have that big of a problem with the pick, but I did have a 4th round grade on him, and he ended up getting taken right at the end of the 3rd round. So it's not that big of a reach, but it is, technically speaking, a reach in my grading system. So the grade for that pick is a B-, even though I do think he has significant upside as a linebacker prospect. Moving on to your 4th round pick, one of my most favorite picks in this draft, just in terms of fit, and I want to see them play now, is Will Shipley to this Philadelphia Eagles team. Saquon Barkley, I think, is only on a 1-year deal. I'm not positive, though. And there's a very good chance that Will Shipley is just going to come in and A, outplay Saquon Barkley at this point in Barkley's career, and B, even if Barkley can't stay healthy, which is I think at this point an assumption you can make. I think he can take over RB1 duties and be very, very, very productive in this Eagles system as a running back one. I think you've got your running back of the future right now. This is a player that I had a top 100 grade on him, so this is a pick after value for me, and the grade for that pick is a B+. Next pick up is the first of 3 fifth-round picks, and that is Ainias Smith, a slot receiver out of Texas A&M. And I had a 4th-round grade on him. I think he is someone who can come in and contribute right away, especially as a returner. Potentially with new rule changes, that could be a new role for him in this offense. And also, just straight up as a slot receiver, I really like him. I think he's got a significant amount of upside there. I think he has wide receiver 3 sort of potential as a slot receiver. And I think that he adds something that this team doesn't necessarily have right now, which is a guy that can play in the slot 100% of the time and be a yak threat afterwards. They've got the tight end. They've got a traditional Y tight end. They got the X receiver in A.J. Brown. They got the Z receiver in Devonta Smith. Now they've got themselves a contributor in the slot, in my opinion, in Ainias Smith. I originally had a 4th-round grade on him. You're getting him in the 5th. That is a pick after value, and the grade is a B+. Jeremiah Trotter, a linebacker out of Clemson. A lot of people sort of fell off the bandwagon for Jeremiah Trotter Jr. this year, and I certainly understand why. If you go back 2 years ago, he looks like a 1st-round kind of player, and this past year, he didn't play like that. And I think a large part of that is the Clemson football staff being unwilling to adapt to the times. Also, they changed his role significantly from this past season to the year prior. All in all, I think there's more to like about Jeremiah Trotter Jr. than a lot of people see. I ended up having a top 100 grade on him. And getting him in the 5th round is tremendous value. I think he's going to be a contributor and potentially even a starter year 1 in this defense that is going to be dramatically different than it was this past season. This pick is an A grade for me. Up next, you drafted a Michigan man, Trevor Keegan, an interior offensive lineman, likely a guard, out of Michigan. And I liked Trevor Keegan. I think he's a good player. I think he is someone who probably is not going to end up being a true starter in the NFL, but I think he is someone who either left guard or right guard, if he's playing, you're not particularly upset, but you also realize that that's probably a position that you could upgrade. That's kind of the level of player I see him as, just a steady sort of, okay, I'm not a liability, but I'm not really exceeding expectations either kind of player. And I did, in fact, have a 5th-round grade on him, so this pick is graded as a B. Last 2 picks, 6th-round picks here, you have Johnny Wilson, a wide receiver out of Florida State. Specifically, he'll be an X, and Dylan McMahon, an interior offensive lineman out of NC State University. Now, Dylan McMahon, I had a 6th-round grade on him. He is effectively at this point just an athlete. However, I do actually think with the Eagles specifically, because you're the Eagles and you just draft athletic offensive linemen and turn them into all-pro caliber players, he is someone who's probably going to end up starting and being a very, 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 very good player for you. That being said, the pick I actually want to talk about here is Johnny Wilson, wide receiver out of Florida State. Again, Johnny Wilson is another guy that sort of fell off the map in terms of hype from 2 years ago to this past year. And I didn't really get it. I think a lot of that was the fact that Florida State became a power rushing team that leaned on their defense, as opposed to a team that had to score points in order to win games, which they were 2 years ago. So he really didn't have the opportunity. Now, he also did drop a lot of balls this past season, which may or may not be a problem going forward. Generally speaking, if you drop passes in college, you're going to drop them in the NFL. However, I just think this guy's a special athlete because he's 6'6" and moves really, really well. Uh, there was a lot of talk about maybe converting him to tight end. I don't mean, maybe, but not really. I think what people were actually seeing with that is this kid's going to be a mismatch if we use him in the slot. So I could see him as a big slot sort of player and sort of have that be his path to getting onto the field early on. However, I just really like him still. I still think that he has upside as potentially even a wide receiver 2 in the right offense. And getting him in the 6th round is crazy value. I had a top 100 grade on him. That is an A-plus pick, and the Dylan McMahon is a B grade. Now, if you want to see my grade for the overall draft class, as well as the other teams in your division, you can go ahead and skip to the end of the video, or you can stick around for the next 2 teams, maybe go back, see what I think of Dallas, and then head to the end of the video where I talk about all of the grades for all of the draft classes. Moving on, the New York Giants are up next, and this is a draft class that I think might be a little bit underrated. It doesn't have the volume of other draft classes, but I think this is a really, really good draft class here. Let's go ahead and start with Malik Nabers, the first round pick, number 6 overall for the New York Giants. I had a top 5 grade on Malik Nabers, so getting him at pick 6 is above value. I did have him graded as a slot receiver. I think he could play the Z position as well if you asked him to, but I do think the majority of his career is probably going to be spent in the slot. That's just where I see his upside at the next level. And that being said, I think he's got a ton of upside there. He's explosive with the ball in his hands and without it, a very good route runner, and someone with legitimate wide receiver 1 upside in year 1 of the NFL. This is a very, very good pick, and it is a pick after value, so the grade is a B+. Next pick, 47th overall, you have Tyler Nubin, a safety out of Minnesota. I actually like Tyler Nubin a lot. He was my highest graded safety in this class with an asterisk because I had Cooper DeJean graded as a cornerback, not a safety. However, I think Tyler Nubin is going to come in and start right away for this team at likely the free safety position. I think he's probably best in a split zone scheme rather than one that puts him as a center fielder or something like that. However, I do think he could also do that if you asked him to. This is a instant impact, very good contributor right off the bat for this defense, in my opinion, in Tyler Nubin. I had a top 40 grade on him, so getting him at 47 is a pick after value. The grade is in fact a B+. Your 3rd round pick, 70th overall, was Drew Phillips, a slot corner out of Kentucky. Little bit of a reach for me. I had him graded as a top 100 player, meaning his value would be from picks 76 to 100, but it's not the end of the world. I do think he is someone who's going to be able to come in and play right away. I'm not sure how much upside he has as a slot corner because he is small, even for a slot or nickel corner in the NFL. However, I do think this is going to be someone who's going to come in and play right away. Will certainly be a factor on special teams. This is a solid overall pick, but a little bit early for my taste. The grade is a B-. However, this next pick, I think, was one of the sneaky best picks of the entire draft, and that was Theo Johnson, a tight end out of Penn State. He was my tight end 3 for this entire draft class. Getting him in the 4th round is tremendous value. I think this is your starting tight end right away. I think he's a very, very good contributor as well with legitimate Pro Bowl caliber upside at the tight end position as a traditional sort of Y tight end. I do really, really like Theo Johnson, and I like the fact that he's going to have a lot of opportunities in this offense for touches early on. I had a top 50 grade on him, so to get him at 107, that is several rounds or tiers after value. This pick is an A+. Up next is Tyrone Tracy, a running back slash wide receiver out of Purdue. He played wide receiver early on in his career and then converted to running back this past season. And he was a lot of people's deep sleeper kind of guy at the running back position. They're like, oh, he's going to come out and catch passes and be really productive and all of that. I didn't like him very much, really at all. I had a priority undrafted free agent grade on him. However, I'm also just very low on running backs in general. So you got to take that into account as well. But overall, not particularly a big fan of this pick, especially considering that you lost one of the best running backs in the NFL. Didn't particularly replace him all that much. I don't think Tyrone Tracy is the kind of player that's going to be able to replace that production or impact really at any level. But I think he'll probably find a role as a special teams player and a third down back in obvious passing situations where you don't want to have an extra running back in the game to block. Grade is a C+. Last pick for the Giants, linebacker out of UCLA, Darius Mosow, and I think this is a player that's got some value as a special teams player. That is generally where depth linebackers end up going. Not sure what his role would be. A little bit small in terms of height for the position. Probably a will linebacker. Wasn't that great of an athlete either. Overall, I do think that it's a quality depth piece potentially, or a special teams player. I did, in fact, have a 6th round grade on him, so that grade is a B. And if you want to know the overall grade for this draft class, you can go ahead and skip to the end of the video, or you can stick around through Washington's grading, and then we can get into the draft grades overall. Washington is the final NFC East team that we are going to talk about here today. Starting with the 2nd overall pick in the 2024 NFL Draft, Jayden Daniels, a quarterback out of LSU. And even though I really like Jayden Daniels, I think it's a good fit for the offensive coordinator you have in Cliff Kingsbury, and I think you have an underrated wide receiving core, and I do think Jayden Daniels will be productive early on in his career. It's not who I would have taken number 2 overall, and by definition, it is also a reach, quote-unquote. Now, it's not the end of the world. I'm not going to rip you a new one for taking what you believe to be the 2nd best quarterback in the class. It's not what I believed. I think Drake May was the 2nd best quarterback in the class, who we'll talk about on next Wednesday's video. However, Jayden Daniels, I had him graded as a top 5 grade, and even though this technically wouldn't be a reach by that definition, I am still going to give the grade a B- because you did not take the 2nd best quarterback in the class, in my opinion, in Drake May. That being said, I still think he's a relatively safer quarterback prospect. I do think he will struggle early on, but I think by the end of the year, you will likely see him kind of figure it out a little bit. And I think going forward, you're going to have a very good quarterback. However, I think Drake May is potentially a franchise-changing talent, and that's just who I would have taken there. Your 2nd pick, number 36 overall, was an interior defensive lineman out of Illinois, Johnny Newton. And I was not nearly as surprised as other people about him slipping in the 1st round. In fact, I went on record very early on in the draft process that I don't really see the top 10, top 15 sort of hype that people were talking about. And I thought he was like more of a fringe first round kind of guy. And sure enough, that's where he ended up. He ended up in that top 40 range where I had him graded. And because of that, the grade is a B. You took him in the top 40, and I had a top 40 grade on him. However, I actually think that this is a really good fit for what you have on the roster. Now, maybe you could say edge rusher was a bigger need than the interior defensive line. And while that's probably true, I'm not really sure the edge rushers that were still available at this point in time. And B, Johnny Newton gives you something that you definitively do not have along the interior, and that's someone who can actively penetrate and rush the passer. Deron Payne is a good player, borderline Pro Bowl caliber player in my opinion, and Jonathan Allen has really kind of fallen off the wagon the past few years and has the potential to end up being a cap casualty pretty soon here. And Johnny Newton would then be able to step up and be that replacement, not necessarily in role, but in terms of snaps, he would be that replacement there. Your second round pick was, in fact, Mike Sainristil, a slot corner out of Michigan. And I like Mikey Sainristil a lot. I'm a Michigan fan. And I think he's going to be a plug-and-play contributor in the slot for this defense right away. I think you drafted a starter who has high impact and upside. All in all, I had a top 40 grade on Mike Sainristil. I think he's going to be a very, very good player in the NFL, and I think you guys drafted a playmaker who is not afraid to get physical in the run game. And overall, I really like this pick, and since I had a top 40 grade on Mike Sainristil, this is a pick after value, meaning that it has earned a B plus grade. However, 3 picks later, at number 53 overall, you took Ben Sinnott, a tight end out of Kansas State, who I didn't like that much. I'm going to be honest with you. Everybody was talking about him. He was a late riser in terms of like he didn't even really start getting early day 2 hype until after the combine, and it wasn't because he like blew up the combine really. Like he had a good combine, but he didn't do anything I wasn't expecting him to do. This really just strikes me as a guy that they really, really like, and I don't know if that means he's going to be good or not. I was consistently lower on him than almost everybody throughout this whole draft process. I had a 4th round grade on him, and he wasn't anywhere near my tight end 2, and I believe he was the 2nd tight end taken in the class. So, all in all, I'm not a big fan of this pick. I gave this grade a C. Another pick that I'm not the biggest fan of would be Brandon Coleman, a offensive lineman out of TCU. I had him graded as a guard. However, I think it's very likely that you're going to try to get him to stick at tackle. But ultimately, I think his future in the NFL is in the interior of the offensive line. You obviously have a pretty big need at left tackle. I think Cornelius Johnson is your starting left tackle right now, and that's not great. So that is something that you probably should have looked to upgrade more vigorously, but it doesn't matter that much anymore. I had a 4th round grade on Brandon Coleman as a guard that is 2 tiers before value. You took him in the top 75, then goes to top 100, and then goes to the 4th round. Overall, not a big fan of this pick. I still think Brandon Coleman does have some upside as a starter a few years down the road, but right now, I don't know. I think there were better picks that could have been made at that point in time of the draft. The grade is a C+ for me. Luke McCaffrey at pick 100 was your next pick, your second 3rd round pick, and I had a 4th round grade on him as a wide receiver, But more so than that, I probably would just give you a B, because technically the fourth round in my grading system begins after pick 100, so it wouldn't really be a reach. So I probably would have given you a B for that. I didn't. I gave you a B minus, because I'm not really sure that he gives you anything different than what you have. Like, your three starting wide receivers are all wide receivers that I have graded as Z's, and now you're adding another Z wide receiver in Luke McCaffrey. Now, generally speaking, if you're a Z wide receiver, you can also probably play in the slot, which is the case with Jahan Dodson. But ultimately, I like him better as a Z than in the slot. But you have a very underrated wide receiving core, in my opinion, and I'm just not sure what adding Luke McCaffrey does for that unit. Like, I think he's a good player, but he's probably wide receiver 4 off the bat. And if he was a big bodied guy or a true, like, deep threat, then I could understand the pick a little bit more. But it seems like you're just quadrupling down on the same style of player. And because of that, the grade does get knocked a little bit for me. Your next pick in the fifth round, you did not have a fourth round selection, was Jordan McGee, a linebacker out of Temple. And Temple players, you know that they're good kids for the most part. They got a good culture over there, hard workers, all that stuff. This is not a draftable player, in my opinion. I had a non-priority undrafted free agent grade on him, or just a undrafted free agent grade. So this is a relatively significant reach. Now, it's also in the fifth round, so, like, what are you getting? But preferably you could get at least a player with a fifth round grade in the fifth round. I don't know. I think there were several players on the board that could have offered you a lot more value, even at the linebacker position. This is not a very good pick, in my opinion, because I don't even really think he has that much upside as a special teams player. But I guess I could be wrong. That's always a possibility. After all, what do I know? I'm just some asshole on the internet. But the grade for Jordan McGee is a C for me. After that, your second, fifth round pick, you had Dominique Hampton, a safety out of Washington, or as I put them on the screen, UW. I had a priority undrafted free agent grade on him. So again, a pretty significant reach, but it's not as bad, because I do think that this is someone who does have at least some upside potential. And because of that, the grade is a C plus instead of a C. Your last pick of the 2024 NFL draft, you have Javonte Jean-Baptiste, a edge rusher out of Notre Dame. And as your past two picks can attest to, I think he could have done worse. This is a player that I did have as a draftable player. I had a 7th round grade on him. You took him in the 7th round. I think he has some potential and some upside as a rotational player who could potentially also play on some special teams as well. The grade for Jean-Baptiste is a B. Moving on to the best picks of this video. The best pick of this video, and maybe the best pick of the entire draft, was Cooper DeJean to the Eagles. A close second is Theo Johnson to the Giants. Johnny Wilson is also another A-plus grade, and then had Jeremiah Trotter Jr., Malik Nabers, and Tyler Nubin as the other picks that I thought were very, very good. And the Eagles and the Giants, I don't think it was any secret, having watched the video, if you did to this point, that those are the two best draft classes in this video. And now that we already have spoiled that, let's go ahead and move on to ranking the draft classes. Now, normally when I do this, I would talk about the worst team first and work my way up to the best team. We're going to do that backwards, because I got more to say about Washington than I do the rest of these three teams combined. The Eagles get an A-plus grade for me. They absolutely knocked it out of the park. There was only one pick that I mildly disagreed with, and it's not that big of a deal. Everything else, banger after banger after banger of a draft pick. one of the best classes. In fact, not even probably one of the best draft classes. Of the ones we've looked at so far, the Eagles had the best draft class. And I've given out 2 other A-plus grades. So I'm probably going to need to go back and re-rank all of them at some point. But maybe I'll do that later on in the draft process. But the Eagles, I think, at least having gone through all of the teams that I've gone through right now, they're leading the pack in terms of quality of draft class. The Giants also had a good draft class, and I feel like if they had had more picks, they could have snuck into the A range, but the running back pick also kind of weighed them down a little bit. With only 6 picks, you're really going to have to nail every single one of them in order to get into the A range. I think they got close, but ultimately a B+ is where I settled on them. Dallas, as I said during their breakdown, they pretty much just hit for par with all of their picks. There was a lot of picks at value for Dallas in this year's draft class, and I think that's good because you need those kind of instant contributors, sort of guys. They're like, oh yeah, they're getting drafted right where we thought they were going to get drafted, sort of guys, and they still have some significant upside as well. And Washington is the last team here, and they also currently have the lowest graded draft class out of all of them as well. And this was the first draft class where, having looked at it closer, I was like, I don't know about that one. And I mean, you only had 1 pick of all of your draft picks, and you had a lot of draft picks. You had 6 picks in the top 100. You only had 1 pick after value, and a couple of them were before value, in my opinion. In fact, 3 of them were, I believe. I think you had an opportunity to really address a lot of things, and you chose not to for some reason. There were players available at pretty much all of your draft picks after Mike Sandersville that objectively, at least in my opinion, would have been better picks. Specifically the Ben Sinnott pick. Kingsley Suamataia was still available at that point, and I think he's your starting left tackle. That's like a plug-and-play player for me at that point in the draft, and getting him would have completely changed that draft, because then you're probably not going to reach on a guy like Coleman with your next pick in the 3rd round. And even if you desperately wanted a tight end, Theo Johnson and Jatavian Sanders were both still available when you took Sinnott, and also probably still would have been available in the 3rd round. So I don't really get that pick, and I think that pick really kind of screwed up the rest of this draft class. I don't know if that pick was a reach for a need, or he was just the highest graded player on their board and we just have different opinions about him. I don't know. Coleman was absolutely a reach for a need, though, and you don't really want to reach unless you absolutely have to, and I guess they were in a position where they absolutely had to. But I think there were better ways that they could have gone about it, and I think they kind of fumbled the bag a little bit with this draft class. But that's just me, and what do I know? I'm just some asshole on the internet giving you his opinion. So it's at this point I would like to remind you to like the video if you liked it, subscribe if you want to see more content like this, and go ahead and drop a comment down below if you have something to say. And now with the outro done and out of the way, there's only one thing left to say, and that's that I'll see you next time.